Welcome, all of you, and welcome to our presenter today, Joy. Joy, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself and then go ahead and take over with your presentation.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. I want to thank Lisa very much for providing this webinar for all of you today from the Center for Coaching Certification. Let's see here if we can get the slide deck going. That always helps. And, oh, well, this technology here, it always helps if you have things connected. Our topic for today is to quick start your leadership role, and that's about positioning yourself and your team for success. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am and what my background is. My husband and I have a partnership in Kacik Consulting Services, and what we specialize in is team and leadership development consulting. We work with profits, nonprofits, a variety of organizations. I also do a lot of conference and event speaking on a wide variety of topics, mostly related to team, individual leadership development types of things. I'm also a certified professional coach through the Center for Coaching Certification. I come to this work after a 30-year career as a professional labor negotiator. So most people don't know what a union rep does. It's a lot of negotiations, yes, and dealing with that type of thing and grievances and arbitration cases and all of that. But it's also a lot of development of the organization and development of local leaders. So I had a wide background in leadership development and was constantly working with teams and building those teams and dealing with conflict resolution and mediating resolutions with my clients and with their employers, sometimes mediating within my clients, strategic planning, lobbying, community organizing. So I have a broad skill set, which really prepared me for the consulting work that I do now. So at the end of the webinar today, I want to tell you, don't worry about taking notes during this webinar. I'm going to go through a lot of material. I like to give folks as much as I can in an hour. And so I'm going to give you a lot, but don't try and take notes because you're going to get a copy of all of this. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that one of the things I do out of my speaking engagements, and this is a way of me doing volunteer work and giving back to other people, is that I provide a complimentary coaching session with me for anyone in the audience who's interested. And so you'll get a handout sent to you after today's webinar. Kathy will send them out to all of you who registered. And so that'll have the resources from the slide deck, as well as how to access that complimentary coaching session with me, and also a link to my website library of articles on all kinds of workplace issues and leadership and team and personal development issues. All of those are free for you to download and share with other folks. So you'll get all of that after today's webinar. So let's get started. And I want to say that some of you may have signed up for this webinar because you are just starting a new leadership role or a new role. Maybe you're not a leader yet. That's okay. It doesn't matter whether the role that you're in is on the very first rung of the ladder in an organization or if you're a CEO. This content applies to you equally. And if you are already in the role, and maybe you've been there 6 months, maybe you've been there 3 or 4 years, you can still use this content to go back and kind of take a fresh look at things that will help you regroup and help you strategize to make yourself and your team more successful. So let's start with what typically happens when you take on a new role. You go through some type of onboarding process if you're lucky, and maybe you won't, but you listen to what people are telling you as they're feeding you information about this role. You're asking questions, you're getting introduced to people, you're getting some ideas from the boss about kind of where they want you to start and maybe what they're looking for, and you start finding out pretty quickly there's all kinds of tasks waiting for you. You find out what's been happening, and the treadmill quickly takes over. And you make mistakes along the way and you learn as you go. And that's typically kind of what happens in a new role. But I want to propose another way to do this. And that is to start with the 30,000-foot view. Start with the big picture of this job by creating your own onboarding plan. And you can do this simultaneously with an onboarding plan that they are giving you. It doesn't have to be a separate thing. So deciding to start slowly and gathering data is the key to this. You get a honeymoon period in a new job, maybe a week, maybe two if you're lucky, where people aren't expecting you to just be digging in right away to the work. And they give you a little time to kind of get familiar with what's going on. And so this is your opportunity to do this. If you're already in a role, you have to kind of carve out the time to do this. So you're going to start by gathering a lot of data, and then you go through a process of making some assessments about that data, putting pieces together, and then deciding what outcomes you want to create and a strategic plan basically for yourself for the desired outcomes for you and your team.
Please answer.
Some of you have seen this before, maybe some of you haven't. I've seen it, I've used it. This is in Stephen Covey's material, but it actually came from Dwight D. Eisenhower, one of our former presidents, who was also a military leader, and he created this. So it's a simple grid. Notice on our left side, we've got not important at the bottom and important at the top. And then urgent on the left and not urgent on the right. So the area where we want to keep our focus often starts with the urgent and the important. It's important, so you want to pay attention to it. You want to be engaged with that. And it's urgent, so obviously it needs to be taken care of. The second box is the one that often is where we miss the boat, because it's important, but it's not something that somebody's knocking down your door for you to get done. And as a result, everybody's got things they want you to do. Everybody's coming to you with issues, and that treadmill just kind of easily takes over. And this box gets missed. So this is where I really want you to focus and pay attention to the things that you deem to be important, but they're not urgent, so you have to carve out the time. The things obviously that are not important but urgent are things other people want you to do. And if it's not important to you, then you have to come up with some ways to delegate that, or actually say, sorry, but that's not going to get done. There's not room on the plate to do that. And how you deliver that message, of course, is important. And then the not urgent and not important. And hopefully we're not spending any time in that box. So I want to start with a quick poll about how much control you feel you have in your current job. So thank you, Kathy. You can choose, this is multiple choice. So there's 5 questions up there. Feel free to choose from them. I'll read them because the people watching this after the fact won't be able to see the poll. I have complete control of my job and accomplish all my goals, or I accomplish most of my goals, or the constant flow of people coming at me with issues and requests often takes over my day, or the treadmill of trying to keep up is wearing me out, or I have ideas and goals that keep getting pushed back. Which of those things apply to you? And Kathy, you can probably see.
Yes, so far we've had 4 people respond. So I'm hoping others are jumping in and getting answers in. So we're getting a few more in. So it looks like the 5 people have said, I accomplished most of my goals. 1 said, constant flow of people coming at me with issues and requests often takes over my day. And then another one said, I have ideas and goals that keep getting pushed back.
Okay. So thank you. You can take the poll down. That's really pretty common. To have somebody who can keep all the balls in the air all of the time is really pretty unusual. And many of us end up like this, on the floor with the balls falling all around us and going, oh, how do I do this? So I'm going to help you in hopefully figuring that out. Let's go back to this matrix for a second. And I'm just going to put these up in the box and give you a minute to just read through these, because this will help you get some context of what I'm talking about with these boxes. So if you look at what's in that upper right box, these are things that maybe no one is going to be barking at you about, but they're the things that can make a huge difference in whether or not you're successful, whether or not you get recognition, and whether or not your team is successful. The continuous improvement, the professional development for you and for your team members, and coaching and mentoring your direct reports is really important. So these are the things that you want to make time for. But if you don't have a real plan for yourself, it's easy for that, again, to get pushed aside, be one of those goals that just keeps getting pushed back. So how do we start this process? We start with this 30,000-foot view. Creating your own onboarding plan, deciding to start slow, all the things that I mentioned earlier, and we're going to go through these kind of one at a time. When starting with the 30,000-foot view, this is something that I actually created in the midst of a coaching session with one of my clients one day. And since then, I'm now using this with a number of clients, and I use this as part of my leadership development program. I just did a webinar for another group doing this. So I call this a spider graph. And years ago, I took a class on writing, and this was one of the tools they taught us. When you have a lot of ideas, you put them down in this spider graph format, because if you put them in an outline format, then you run out of place to add things. And this just gives you a way to just keep adding and adding, and then you can put it in whatever format you want later. And I don't expect you to be able to read what's up here. We're going to kind of go through this. But you start with just a clean piece of paper. And if you want to grab a sheet of paper while we do this, you can kind of start jotting down anything that comes to you while we're doing this. So when you do this with a client, I will tell you that this becomes very highly customized to the individual person, to the job that they have, to the uniqueness of their role, and what they already know about kind of what's going on around them. I'm going to give you some standard things that might be included. So we would draw legs out for the spider, and one of them might be your boss, because there are things you're going to want to know about your boss. Another one is direct reports. The organization's strategic plan, definitions about your role and what's expected of you. Your peers and your teammates are another one. Other departments that your team interacts with. Internal customers, external customers, your goals, all those things can be part of your spider graph. So let's look at how do you go about creating your onboarding plan with this. So we start with questions. And it's about asking good questions, it's about asking the right questions, and it's about asking strategic questions. So part of this process is by designing this to figure out kind of ahead of time, what are some of the good questions that I want to ask? What are the right questions to ask? And what are some strategic questions I need to know the answers to? So here are some ideas. As a consultant, that's part of my role. When I come into an organization and they're saying, we're struggling with X, Y, or Z, I always start with interviewing them. And this is the first question I start with. What's working well? Because we don't want to mess up the stuff that's already going well. What could work better? And then what can I do to make it better? Now, if you're a manager or a leader, you may not want to ask the third question in that way. Because when you say, what can I do to make it better, may lead those folks to believe that if they tell you that you'll do it, and it may be out of your control. So a better question might be, what could make it better? I'm not promising anything, but what could make it better? So here are some things to think about with respect to your boss. So what are the most important things for me to know that other people might not tell me? You know, there's always political hot potato issues. There's potholes you can step in. There's all kinds of things about, you know, this person's personality is this. Make sure you do this when you're working with them, and don't do this when you're working with that person. So these are the kinds of things that maybe other people might not tell you, but you can ask your boss, what should I know that maybe other people won't tell me? What goals do you expect me to achieve? What do you hope that I'll achieve? And here's another important one. What are your own goals, and how does my role impact your goals? I want to do another poll here. Kathy, if you'd put this one up for me, I'd appreciate it. The question here is, choose which answer best describes your knowledge of your boss's goals. And you would choose only one answer here. I know exactly what goals he or she will be held accountable for. Or I have an idea what goals he or she will be held accountable for, or I have no knowledge of what goals he or she is going to be held accountable for. So go ahead and fill out a poll, and we'll see where some of you fall.
So we've got a couple people on the first answer and a couple people on the last answer.
Okay.
And let's see, we just got one on the middle answer.
Okay.
And another on the last. So,
right,
actually, evenly split now, Joy. So there's 2 on the first answer, 2 on the second, 3 on the third.
Okay. So we're all over the place with this. So thanks, Kathy. You can take it down. So why did I ask you that? Well, this is something that a lot of people never think to ask because they're focused on what am I responsible for? And that's something you should be focused on. But a lot of times your boss has goals about what your achievement is because he or she is responsible for the people under him or her, just as you are. So just as your team's success impacts your success, so does yours impact your boss's. And there's lots of choices in a role about where you put your time and your energy. Isn't it a good idea to put it into the things that are going to impact your boss's goals? Because that's going to get you recognized and that's going to help you succeed and it's going to make you more promotable. So if you don't know what your boss's goals are, then you can't focus on those things. You can't choose that when you have 10 different things to choose from about a good thing your department could be doing. So that's a good question to ask. It's always important to know that. Another one is, how are your own goals and how does my role impact those goals? So we had a poll here, Kathy, and let's put that up, and I'm not sure, we may have really kind of already taken care of that. Or is the next poll on strategic planning?
The next one's on strategic planning.
Yeah, okay, so we don't need to do that. All right, so, and then here's another important one for your boss. What kind of communication do you want from me and in what form? Okay, because some people want a lot of details, some people just want bullets, some people want it in an email, some people want it face-to-face or over a video call because they really like connecting with you, and other people may be very formal or may want to be able to share some of what you're giving them with people above them, and so they might want a written report from you. So it's good to know that up front in terms of what communication is going to work. When I do workshops about managing up and having a good relationship with your boss, this is one of the key pieces to that, is really about knowing up front, what does your boss need from you in terms of communication. So actually, I just said this. These are some things that your boss might say. So knowing that is helpful. Are there political potholes I need to avoid? There's always politics in organizations. The more you can find out about that ahead of time, the better. Are there hot button issues I need to know about? And then this is not a question to ask your boss, but this is a question to figure out. What is this person's personality and what communication styles will work best with this person? We can't change other people, but we can change our own behavior and how we adapt our behavior to work with that person. So in your organization, you may have access to a personality style instrument. There's a lot of organizations use DISC or Myers-Briggs. I use Insights Discovery for a lot of reasons. If you don't have access to one of those and you'd like to explore that with me, feel free to reach out and we can talk about that and the value of understanding how you can adapt your behavior to folks. Let's look at the next spider leg here. Is another important one, which is the organization's strategic plan. So what is the plan? It's the plan that includes the mission of the organization, the vision of the organization, and something often called core values. So let's put this last poll up here, Kathy, if you would please, about what you know about your organization's strategic plan. And this is multiple choice, so the answers are nothing. I've read it. I'm very familiar with it. I know which strategic objectives relate to the work of my department. And I understand how I can personally demonstrate the core values of the organization. So those are your choices. You can pick multiple ones if you like. So how are we doing, Kathy?
Well, sorry, I had myself on mute. So
Oh,
we've got we've got one that
okay.
said
You scared me there for a minute.
one that said nothing, 5 that said they're very familiar, 3 said they know which objectives relate to the work of their department, and 2 that said they understand how they can personally demonstrate the core values of the organization.
Okay, terrific. That's great to hear. So it's important for you to know, particularly if you're in a leadership role, where does your job and where does your role fit into this strategic plan? What can you do to impact the success of the strategic plan? In what way can you impact it, both positively and negatively? So there are some things that by not doing, you could really impact it negatively. So again, this is about once you take that 30,000-foot view, and then you've got to do some assessment and make some choices about what are you going to put in that second box of the Eisenhower grid. It's important to know where you fit into the strategic plan, because that will help you in making those choices. And then what are your boss's priorities with respect to the strategic plan? Because again, it's important to know that. So let's talk about your direct reports. This one can be a little bit tricky, and here's why. When you're walking into a new role and you have direct reports, you may know a lot about them, you may not. You may have some information, but there is a lot that may be missing. And so it's good to interview your direct reports, but also it's tricky because they may not be totally forthcoming with you. And that can be because maybe there's some conflicts on the team and they don't want to be the one tattling or sharing that information with the new boss. There may be performance issues with some of their colleagues or with themselves. Maybe they got a bad review the last time. They may or may not want to talk to you about that. Conflicts with other departments that your department works with. Maybe your predecessor played favorites with people and that has left a bad taste in some people's mouth. Maybe they have problems with your boss. Maybe they have problems collaborating, and maybe there's turf issues. Maybe there's competition among the team. So there can be all kinds of things going on. So as a consultant, it's a whole lot easier for me when I walk in from the outside because I can give people a certain level of confidentiality because I'm not responsible for reporting things. So if you work in the organization, you can only give people a limited amount of confidentiality in those interviews, because if they tell you something and you discover that there's sexual harassment going on, for example, you don't have a choice. You're obligated to report that. If in some jobs there could be issues around child abuse or elder abuse. Or something where they're not compliant with a legal requirement. So there are things that you are obligated to report and deal with. So you can't give them complete immunity, but you can give them some level. And what I usually tell people is, I'm going to put a report together and I'm going to report themes that I hear, not what individuals tell me. When you're doing this with your own team, particularly if you've got a small team, you want to be very careful about that, because if you put something out there that one person said, they're going to spend more time figuring out who said it than they are going to be spending time dealing with the issue. So it is tricky, but nevertheless, it's worth doing. So start with these 4 questions, because this is a great place to start. What's working well? What could work better? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rank this and why? And then what could make it better, or what can I do to make it better? This gives you all kinds of information. They're broad, open-ended questions, and people will tell you what they're willing to share out of just these questions. So here are some other things to talk about with your direct reports, because part of your responsibility now as a leader is also to develop your direct reports and help them to grow and help them to be promotable. So you want to start with their strengths and where they excel. And let me just tell you a little story about this. One of the women that I coached was looking for a director level position. She was already a manager. And one of the great things that she had done that had made her successful at that level was that when she was first promoted to a manager's position, they gave her a brand new department. And they gave her basically a bunch of flunkies from other departments. They gave her people who those managers were kicking them out of the departments. It was either kick them out, find another place for them, or fire them. They were not doing well. So she said, you know, I just decided from the beginning, I have no choice here. I'm going to start with what they're good at. And that's where she started. And instead of focusing on trying to develop the things that were really wrong with them, she started by focusing on their strengths, encouraging those strengths, building momentum for them. And then she was able to help them have the confidence to grow in some of the areas. And because she had focused on their strengths, they also knew she had their back. And so she built this into a really high performing team. And she showed other managers these folks had worked with, hey, there is value in these folks, and they can do great work. So that was just something I learned. I always learn things from my clients as well. And this was one of the things I learned from her, that when you start with people's strengths, it just snowballs. A second one is, what are your goals for the period? Because you want to be able to support the goals of your direct reports. You also want to be able to help remove obstacles and challenges for them. So knowing what their obstacles and challenges are right out of the starting gate is going to be important. And then here's a great question. I love this one. What do I need to know that I don't know enough to ask? That usually stops people in their tracks. And if they weren't as forthcoming before, this question sometimes will open them up a little bit to share even more with you. So as I go through this process with clients, we end up with a spider graph that looks like all kinds of stuff. And as I said, this becomes very highly customized with each client to what they need to be looking at and how they need to prepare if they take on this role. Here are some other types of questions to think about asking. In what ways do you or your department intersect with my department or my role? And in what ways is it helpful for us to collaborate? What do you need for collaboration to be successful with our department? So it's about building relationships with other folks and other departments in the organization. How do we work together? How can my department better serve you? These are all things that help you build those relationships and build recognition with other departments, with other managers whose help you might need someday to remove an obstacle for someone in your department. What metrics would be helpful to know and why? So in a lot of organizations today, they have things called dashboards, which give you all kinds of metrics. I just talked to a client yesterday who is being challenged by one of her direct reports, who is a VP, who doesn't know how to take those metrics and make use of them. And so it's important to know, what should I be looking at on my dashboard? What kinds of things should I be watching for? And what are important things for me to pay attention to? What are some learnings that you can share with me so I don't make mistakes that other people have already made? I mean, let's face it, why not take advantage of things other people have already learned the hard way? What are obstacles that you might not think we can help you with if you're talking to another manager or people from another department? Because if you can break down obstacles for other people, that also gets you and your department recognized. What do I need to pay attention to? What should I be saying yes to and why? This is a great question for your boss, because sometimes you have to say no to people. You can't take on everything. So getting an idea of what are the most important things that I need to say yes when someone asks me this, but why? You need to know the why behind things, and what should I be saying no to? What are some of the obstacles that I might encounter? Help me be prepared for some of those things. So that's about creating your onboarding plan. Now, the gathering data, plan ahead. So you start with your spider graph, review it, polish it, be open to things that come along that you didn't think of, and be prepared to kind of improvise as you go along and ask additional questions. Plan your own onboarding schedule, because maybe they don't have you scheduled to meet with all these people, but you can go out and do this. You can go out and meet with clients, with internal clients, external clients. You can schedule opportunities to go and talk to these people and gather all kinds of information. So plan your schedule to meet with the folks that you've identified, gather the data that you need, have the questions ready. Now, here's another thing. If they've created an onboarding plan for you, it's great to have these questions ready so that the first time you meet the person, You've already come prepared. That already impresses them, that you're asking them good, thoughtful questions ahead of time. The next thing is making assessments. Okay, so now you've got all this data. And now it's like you're overwhelmed. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on here. I don't even know where to start, okay? Well, you're going to get what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly. So here are some things to expect and to think about. What are the expectations for you in this role? And where are there conflicting messages that you need to clarify before you begin? Because maybe your boss has told you one thing and somebody from another department has told you the exact opposite. So how do you figure out how to clarify that? What are the gaps between the goals and what's really happening now with your department? Where are the opportunities for your team and for you to shine? So where are those gaps that your team can say, hey, we can fix this, or we can start this. Here's a new program we could start that would fix that whole problem. That's the kind of thing that gives your team the opportunity to shine and gives you recognition as well. To some degree, this is one of those political things that's hard to assess up front, but you need to kind of keep your eyes and ears open and listen and trust your gut sometimes a little bit. To some degree, figuring out who can you rely on and who do you need to watch out for. Trust, but verify. Be cautious. Decide for yourself. I've so many times in my career had people tell me, oh, you can't work with so-and-so there, blah, 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 blah. And I start out with the attitude, we'll see. And then I have no trouble working with them. So it's judging for yourself, but also with some caution. And with your own direct reports, trusting but verifying, because you have to hold them accountable and you're going to be held accountable for their work. So you need to make sure they are doing what they say they're doing and they're on target with the goals and all of those kinds of things. So you may also find out in your department, you've got some people in the wrong job. Maybe you've got somebody in your department who's actually incompetent or misbehaving. So do you need to make some changes in personnel that are long overdue that maybe the last boss just covered over or didn't want to deal with? Don't assume that what others have told you is true. Where a person's job is on the line, it's necessary for you to do your own investigation. Having been a union rep, I can tell you many a manager embarrassed themselves in front of me because I walked in and had done my homework. I had one manager who was set to discipline someone and give them a 2-day suspension. And he went through everything this person had allegedly done. And I said, well, yeah, all those things did happen, but you have the wrong employee. So it's your job. If you're going to issue discipline or you're going to have to deal with behavior, it's your job to investigate it yourself. Where is there an opportunity to coach others, whether they be your direct reports or maybe folks from other departments that need your help? How can you contribute even more by helping and mentoring and coaching folks? So part of your role is to support your team and give them the confidence to embrace their strengths. And that's what coaching can help you do. So again, things that you may need to fix, you may need to take action, because also that's something that's very hard for people to do, is to reprimand people or fire them. But sometimes you need to do it. And in some situations, everyone else in your department knows that there's a problem and they've been waiting for the new boss to come in and they're expecting you to deal with this because this person may be interfering with them being able to do their jobs. So it is your job to deal with those ugly issues, okay? But there are ways to do it well, there are ways to do it appropriately, and that's something you want to talk about. I'd be glad to talk to you about that. So you gather the data and then you kind of synthesize what you've learned. So you do some assessment. And from that, then we're talking about now, what are the most important goals that you're coming out of this with? And, you know, there are going to be goals all over the place, but you've got to be brutal in choosing what are the top ones, because you can't do everything. In this assessment, it may be, okay, these are some things I want to tackle in the first year. These will have to wait until next year, or maybe you've got a 5-year plan. Maybe you heard so much that you can do that. Maybe it's going to take a 5-year plan, but you've got to be really brutal, because if you take on too much, you set yourself up for failure, you set your team up for failure. So you want to set everybody up for success. And that means having goals, not only that are in themselves achievable, but the number of goals that you've set are achievable and manageable. So where are there gaps? And where can you bridge those gaps? So it's a case of kind of putting the puzzle pieces together as you're doing this analysis and this assessment and trying to figure out how are you going to put things in the Eisenhower box or boxes. So we've talked about the performance issues. Now we're putting the pieces together. Okay, so we're back to our spider graph and we're going back and we're looking at all these things. So what are the outcomes you want? If you're setting good goals, you're starting with the outcome. Not just starting on a project, but what's the outcome that you're looking for from the project? Because you can start on great goals and great ideas and start down a path, but if you don't know where you're going, you may end up someplace else. So the goal has to be clear and achievable, and it has to include what the outcomes are in very clearly defined ways. And that's something else that I help people with, is how do you write goals so that you can be sure you're going to hit the targets? Because when any of that, I use something called the 5 elements of good goals, and I've had companies come to me to help them with their goals because they're not quite achieving what they want. And when I teach them these 5 elements, and then they look at where they've missed their targets, they can pretty much always say, okay, this was the element that was missing. So writing good goals is critical, and knowing what outcomes you want is really important. So identify for yourself what you want to accomplish in the first 90 days. It's kind of like we talk about the first 100 days of a presidency. Well, it's the first 90 days in a role. So what are some key things, some key quick wins that you can get in terms of building relationships and in terms of lots of things? There's a book out, and you may want to get your hands on this one, called The First 90 Days. And it's about how to help you develop that strategy for that first 90 days. And then let's go back to the Eisenhower matrix. So the urgent and important is the do it now box. The second box, which I had you focus on earlier today, the important but the not urgent, is decide when to do it. If you do not set targets for yourself, that's how it gets pushed back all the time. So you need to have targets for yourself and deadlines for yourself, and you need to have benchmarks along the way, because if you don't, then it's like becomes overwhelming and you keep putting it aside and putting it aside and putting it aside. And here's another hint. Getting started is often the hardest part of any job. And so when I'm procrastinating because of that, what I've learned to tell myself is, okay, just gather the tools that you need. That's the first place to start, is gather the information, gather the tools, gather the whatever. Start by gathering things and getting them in front of you. And that's one place that you can start, because procrastination is very common to all of us out there, really. The third box about, okay, it's urgent for someone else, but not for you. This requires delegation, or needing to say maybe to another department, we cannot take on that project for you right now. We've got our priorities, and that one is going to have to wait. And then the box that it's not urgent or not important, trash it, get rid of it, get it off your to-do list so it's not haunting you. Here are some things to think about in terms of the first 90 days that I think are critical. I have not read that book, but this is what I think. How do you want to be viewed by these people at the end of 90 days? Your boss, your direct reports, other colleagues, departments, higher level leaders, customers. At the end of 90 days, what do you want these people saying about you? Because they're all going to be talking about you. So what do you want them to say? And how do you plan those 90 days to develop those relationships in positive ways with positive outcomes? And they may be small wins, but they're things that you can build on. It's not just about the tangible accomplishment. It's not just about outcomes. It's about building relationships also. It's about the goodwill that you establish. It's about the character that you show others. Are you showing them integrity? Are you showing them that you will deal with them in positive ways? Are you trustworthy? Integrity, honesty, dependability. Can they rely on you? Do you show empathy for people? Do you show them grace when people make mistakes? I want you to think about this. As a leader, what is the vision that you need to create for yourself and your team? People will follow leaders who have a vision, who can describe that vision in a story form that engages people, that gets people excited about, yeah, that's what we can do. That's the impact we can have. That's what we want our customers to say about us. That's creating a vision that people want to be engaged with. And that also motivates direct reports then to be part of the plan. Another thing you can do is build your team by giving them input into this plan, giving them input into the vision as well. You can have your own vision, but you can also help them build out that vision. A team without a leader to follow can easily fail. So create a vision that encourages others to walk with you, to follow you, or better yet, walk with you, beside you. That's what creates a great team. So 2 things to remember about you creating your own onboarding plan and creating success for yourself. It's in your hands alone. These are tools I'm giving you today to help start off the right way. And if, as I said earlier, if you're already in the role, take a couple steps back to go back and look at the 30,000 foot view. It's not too late to start now and go, okay, I've been in this role for 3 years. I'm going to go talk to our other departments we work with and say, hey, what's working? What can we do better to serve you? Go talk to your customers. Go talk to your boss. Go talk to your direct reports and reassess. Hey, okay, let's take a step back as a team here. What's working well? What can we do better? And maybe one-on-ones with them to get that input too about how can I help you better? Your plan sets the stage for your success. So this type of planning is really critical to your success as a leader. After today, you're going to get an email from Kathy, and she's going to send you the link for the recording, because you'll be able to go back and listen to the recording again. You'll also get a handout, and I told you at the beginning, don't worry about taking notes, because all the content of all my slides is in that handout, along with actually some of the slides themselves. And then I'm also offering a couple of other things to you. In the email that you'll get, it's actually a PDF from me. There's also a link there that you can go onto my website, to my newsletter page. I have 3 years worth of articles on all kinds of really pertinent subjects that really come from my clients. They come from my coaching clients, they come from leaders, they come from CEOs, they come from managers, they come from people who are just starting out in their careers. All kinds of topics that people want my help with. And so I've created this library of articles, and they're all available. They're free to download. You can share them with other people. So please feel free to take advantage of those. And then as you go there, there's also a button where you can sign up to receive my future newsletters as well. And then I'm offering all of you who are on this call today or on this webinar a complimentary call with me. I will be glad to spend an hour with you about anything that you want to talk about. I know that some of you sent in questions ahead of time, and one of them was about negotiations. As you heard, I do have a substantive background in negotiations, so I would suggest sign up for a call with me. Reach out, email me, and I'll be glad to talk to you about that. So Kathy, what other questions do we have? And if you have questions at this point, feel free to put them in the chat box, and I'm happy to answer them. We have about 15 minutes, and I'm glad to spend some time.
Yeah, a couple have come in, and I'll give you those. One of them, somebody was asking the name of the book, and I'm actually going to share. I have this one. I don't know if this is the one you're referring to, Joy. It's
back here.
This one is called Your First 100 Days in a New Executive Job. Okay, you have a different one.
Yeah. Two different ones.
So there's a couple books out there.
Well, take a look at them on Amazon. That you can read a little bit about them. But this one is The First 90 Days, and the author is Michael D. Watkins.
Excellent.
So I'm sure either of those books, would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that came in, they said, I see how you can use the spider web to gather a sense of the politics in the organization. Are there faster ways to get up to speed on key allegiances in the organization?
Wow, that's a tricky one. I think a lot of that honestly is luck, because there are people who will tell you everything and you don't know who those people are, and you don't know how much of it you can trust. There will people who will tell you nothing and you've got to figure it out all on your own. And so some of it I really just think is luck in terms of who you're running into, but some of that you can get out with a couple of those questions, which is, what are the political potholes that I need to avoid? Or what are some of the hot potato issues here right now? And how do different people stand on those issues would be another good question. Kind of who's on what side of those issues, help me kind of get a lay of the land there. And these are things that I would ask of your boss first. You've got to be careful who you ask those kinds of questions of, because if you just go around and you start asking that of every department, then you might also get a reputation for fishing for gossip and dirt on people, and that's not your intent. At least I hope it isn't. So ask some of those questions of your boss, and then what should I know that I don't know enough to ask about is another good question. And your direct reports may be able to help you with some of that. So, but I don't have an answer for, is there a faster way? Because I think a lot of it is happenstance in terms of how you gather a lot of that information. But keep your ears to the ground. Listen more than you talk in some situations, and you'll hear some things. And then you can maybe start carefully digging a little bit. But that's a tough issue.
Nice. Good. Everyone, those are the questions I had in the panel. So if you have additional questions, please put them in the chat box, put them in the question box. Happy to pass those on. And then we even have the option, if you raise your hand, I can give you the opportunity to come on live if you want to be in the recording, and you can ask your question live. So what additional questions do all of you have? And Joy, while they're thinking about it, I'm thinking some of the people we have here own their own small business.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the tips you have for them in terms of how they effectively consider what their approach and what they're doing?
Mm-hmm. So I think with your own customers, it's always good to go back to customers. If you're a coach, for example, go back to prior clients, check in with them, see how they're doing, and saying, I'm just trying to do some of my own development. I'm looking for feedback. Would you be willing to give me, 10 minutes of your time? And you can ask those 4 good questions. What worked well in our relationship? What could I have done better? What could have worked better for you? And what could I have done differently? What are the things that I need to pay attention to? All those kinds of questions, and clients will give you that. I have gone back to organizations I've consulted with and had, sit downs with the CEO and say, so give me some feedback. And I've gotten great feedback that way. And so I've learned a lot of times that way. And so when you are looking for new business, it's really about asking a lot of questions up front about their needs more than what you offer. So it's about, and you've heard this before, about finding their pain points, but it's about, what do you need? What are your challenges? What are ways that you're already thinking that I might be able to help you? Or what do you need to know about me? So just listening and asking questions and going back and being honest with all of your clients about asking for feedback. I mentioned a little while ago the personality instrument that I use, which is Insights Discovery. That has something that is it's a kind of a feedback piece. It's not specifically a 360, but it can be used that way. But you can have up to 10 people do an abbreviated profile about you to see how they see your personality, and then it also gives them an opportunity to share feedback for you. And so I did that once just to see how it worked because I used the tool, and I had my clients fill it out for me. And so that was really cool, and I got some great tips from doing that. So those are some of the things I would suggest.
Nice, nice. And for those on the call that are graduates, on the dashboard you have for giving assessments, they can give the disc. They can also do, if you give it to multiple people on the team, you can pull a team report, and there are 360s there as well. So an additional resource. Let's see, somebody else said, thanks so much for the tips for those of us who have our own businesses as well. This was a great webinar. So thanks for that positive feedback. We've got another one down here. Give me a second to open this up bigger. This one said, I have managed small groups and have difficulty expressing challenge to move my career up. Any advice?
Kathy, read that one again to me, please.
Yeah, I'm struggling to understand it. If you can help clarify. So I have managed small groups and have difficulty, they said, expressing challenge.
I'm not sure what expressing
up. Yeah, maybe facing challenges, handling challenges to move my career up. And they wanted advice.
Okay. So that is really at the heart of a lot of the coaching that I do, which is helping people move up in their organizations. And I always start with your strengths. I find that the majority of my clients are not able to clearly articulate their strengths. They don't recognize their own strengths. And so that's a place that we start. Mm-hmm. And so it may be about interviewing some trusted colleagues about what they see in you and what they value in you. And it's also about dissecting your successes. Because when you go back and look at the things that you've done well, oftentimes, and I think this is one of the reasons people don't recognize their own strengths and successes, because when you accomplish something, that treadmill has you right on to the next thing. We don't take time to celebrate our successes oftentimes, mm-hmm. or to just kind of bathe in them and revel in the fact that I really did it, you know? So what I encourage people to do is to think about, what did you do that worked? And then go back and dissect that and say, why did it work? What did you do that made it successful? And it's out of that and out of my coaching people through those conversations that we often, sorry, that was just snow sliding off my roof here in Vermont. So it's out of those conversations with clients that I help them to start seeing themselves differently and seeing their own strengths. And so that is a place that we start. And then the next is to look at where are some areas that you may want to develop, and looking at how you can do that, and how you can stretch yourself and take on stretch assignments and create opportunities for yourself. But I would start with your strengths and really look at what you've done successfully, and then start trying to repeat those behaviors.
Excellent, excellent. So you've got a couple more people saying, you know, this is great, and really expressing how much they're appreciating it. I think the clarification this person gave is when they're interviewed, they're asked to explain challenges, and they have a little difficulty responding to that.
Okay. All right. So, and that's often something that I practice with clients is how, because that's often a question in interviews. Tell me about a challenge that you had and how you handled it. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, you don't want to make yourself look bad. So people have a hard time choosing. So that's one thing that we start with is how do you choose a challenge where you came out well? And even if it's a challenge that you didn't come out so well, you can handle that by saying, so here was the challenge. Here's how we assessed it and the plan that we created. It didn't come out the way we wanted. And here's what I learned from that. And here's what I would do differently in the future. because they're not expecting you to be perfect. They're not expecting you to be somebody who magically always handles challenges just perfectly. Sometimes it's more important for an interviewer to actually hear, if you screwed up, what did you do about it? How did you fix it? Or what did you learn from it? And what will you do differently next time? And be able to talk about it with a voice of confidence, as opposed to a voice of, I screwed up and it was really bad. And, I know it didn't go well. And so, well, I guess I learned this from it. And, next time if I had the chance to do it over, I would do this. No, you don't want to have that voice. You want to have the, well, this was the challenge and we thought we had it assessed. And so we developed this plan. But, the best laid plans of mice and men don't always work so well. So it didn't. And this was what happened. And so as damage control in the midst of it, these are some of the things that we did to handle it. And it still didn't come out perfectly the way we wanted it to. So what I learned from that was these were some pieces we missed in the assessment, or in doing the damage control, we could have done this a little bit differently, or there were some questions that we should have asked up front that we didn't realize. And so those are all things that I would look at differently the next time. And that's what I learned from it. Hear the difference.
Yeah. Big difference. And to me, that's actually an opportunity to sound like, okay, this is somebody we want. They know they make mistakes. They're okay with it. They're addressing it. They're learning from it. So that's awesome.
Exactly. And while we're talking about mistakes, let me just say this too. One of the things that I talk to leaders about is being a leader who encourages failure. Mm-hmm. If your team isn't ever failing, then they're not trying hard enough. They're not trying new things. They're not breaking new ground. And so, because you are going to fail when you're trying new things. And so, I am fortunate. I was so blessed to have a boss who, I was always doing new things and sometimes getting myself into messes, but he never once criticized me or said, why did you do that? He said, what'd you learn? What are you going to do differently next time? Okay, when are you going to try it again? And so it's like, wow, when you get that kind of support, then you're willing to try new stuff. And so be that kind of a boss, be that kind of a leader that encourages people when they fail instead of criticizing them or discouraging them.
Nice. Excellent. At this point, what I'm seeing in here is really just people saying thank you for.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your appreciation. I'm glad this was helpful to you today, and I am looking forward to having some follow-up conversations with all of you. So feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to chat with you.
Yeah, excellent. And somebody liked the advice, fail to succeed. Yeah. Awesome. So everyone, to let you know what will happen, I will load this on the YouTube channel. And when it's there, I will send an email out to everyone who registered. And I'm going to be attaching the PDF that Joy so graciously provided with slides and resources on it. So you'll have access to that document. And I will CC Joy on it, so you'll be able to see her email there as well. So please know that email is going out today. So if for any reason you don't see it, look in your junk mail. It might end up in your spam folder. So that's going to be happening. Joy, thank you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate you hosting this today and for inviting me to be part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, great presentation. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this out, everyone. Thank you.